Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It's Thursday morning here in the upper Midwest of the North American continent. Uh, there's quite the weather system that's coming through this area right now. Thankfully, we're on the southern reaches of it, so we got lots of wind, a little bit of snow with mostly rain. The rain came through really heavy a day and a half ago, and there's some tornadoes. A couple towns in the county my wife works in over next to us were flattened by tornadoes. But north of us, where we used to live in Manitoba as children, they're getting a blizzard in the middle of April. It's quite unprecedented. We had that stuff some as a child up there, but it's a crazy weather system, and it certainly feels like things are changing globally in terms of climate and weather. But that's a whole nother conversation. First thing I want to talk to you about today is a group that I've been kind of into this last week and a half or so that really kind of been like blowing my mind a little bit. And it's not really jazz. It's what they self-describe as marching band techno. And they're out of Hamburg, Germany, the great city of Hamburg. And their name is MEUTE. There's an E added in there before the U, MEUTE. And you have all the great institutions of the German marching band, from bass drums to snare drum, cymbal, percussion, little marching kits, to the marimba, to a sousaphone, tuba, a bass, saxophone, tenor saxophone, alto saxophone, trombone, two trumpets. Hope I'm not missing anybody in there. It's an incredible ensemble. And one of the other great German institutions is techno music. And here in America, we get a very mixed bag and a very bad understanding for most people of what electronic music is. A lot of it's descended directly from disco music. A lot of producers in disco kind of went underground, Detroit, Chicago, in Western Europe. And house music was kind of just an extension of disco. And techno, of course, kind of breaks up that disco form to floor beat some, and deep house is one of my favorite little subgenres of house. More organic, more melodic sometimes. It's not that diva club house. It's more melancholic and chill. Deep house often has cool instrumentation from organic instruments, often nice kind of soothing vocals. It's not that bright club house techno stuff that you hear. But anyway, in America, their definitions of that stuff's really kind of sparse, and most of it's just called techno here. They don't know the difference between most of it. Drum and bass, jungle, it's all kind of just it's techno in America. But they truly are doing something pretty groundbreaking, these guys, MEUTE. They're taking club hits of the day, of the last 5-10 years, and bringing them into the live instrumentation and reproducing them, remixing them, essentially live. And it's pretty awesome. And again, the jazz tradition comes out of the instruments that were invented mostly for the European marching bands, the German marching bands. The saxophone was a marching instrument. The tubas were kind of a marching low end. The upright bass drum, all that stuff. A lot of it's very much still in marching bands today. They wear these really cool matching red outfits. And then, like I said, they cover stuff that it's peripheral here in America to some degree, but I think a lot of it's really mainstream in Europe. Some of the songs that I've heard, as a Trentemolo remix, it's just fantastic. The Flume remix is really incredible. I think that was one of the first ones that really went viral for them. But what's cool about it is I've often heard in swing music, there's shapes, okay? There's shapes and counter shapes. And some shapes are angular and pointed, other shapes are round. Some shapes are shaded kind of blues and greens, other shapes are yellows and oranges. And so part of conducting and arranging and composing is creating musical sounds that are shapes. Ellington was the master at this, creating a lavender bulbous shape, then having some small yellow piercing to offset that soft lavender. it's creating context, art, visual color, visual oral uh, expression of the soul and the human condition. And I've often heard in modern dance music, everything from kind of R&B remixes all the way through to drum and bass, and even some of the real crazy, what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the dubstep sounds, these big swirling sounds. I've often heard a lot of things in those sounds being replicated from things that swing bands did. A big boom, 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 and another sound that's going, ew. I mean, these sounds are kind of offsetting and creating these shapes and colors. And I've often heard a lot of electronic music kind of replicating things that swing music did years ago. Only in the swing music, it was 18 musicians creating these sound shapes and colors. Today, it's one guy behind a computer making these sounds happen. And what we have here is kind of as an inverse of that, where they're taking music made by a DJ, one or two people in a laboratory with computers and sound banks, and they're replicating this stuff live with organic instruments. And it puts a new dimension in it. It puts a new level of dynamics into it. The textures and the sounds are coming entirely from brass, woodwinds, and percussion. The marimba is often kind of like the choral background of these pieces, and then they're using these horns to stutter and to create loops and patterns that are all being played by these guys in a completely mobile kind of way. They can move around while they're doing this stuff. I've watched a number of concerts, one in Paris that's really outstanding. I've seen some stuff in a rooftop concert that was really outstanding. The one guy, Andernak, who's the bass sax player, he sings a couple songs. Just incredible. And I just think it's an interesting little parallel to what jazz was doing. And I would like to hear these guys actually reinterpret a couple old swing songs. I think it'll be fantastic. Start, for example, with Sing, Sing, Sing. Imagine that being done by this band today. I think they would absolutely kill that. And the links between dance music and the popularity of taking a song that people know, but making it a little bit more catchy, a little bit more danceable, a little bit more fun. It goes back to, like I said, the early days of swing and jazz and minstrelsy and ragtime even. It was always kind of an element of popularity, but enhancing it to be fun and danceable and sexual, to be quite honest. And so I hear this band MEUTE, and they're just doing really, really cool things that's really even hard to get a pulse on. It's really incredible musicianship. And there's another great concert on the rooftop of the Elbe Philharmonic, this great new building they built right on the Elbe River in Hamburg. They're up on the rooftop of that sucker. And they do probably 6 or 7 songs up there. And it'll give you a real idea what they're about. And like I said, it's not jazz, but because its roots go back so far deep into where the music kind of is all back in that original trunk, they're linked to a lot of the roots of jazz in a lot of ways. And I think it'd be interesting to hear them tackle some of that black American swing music, and just Jumping Out the Woodside by Count Basie. I'd love to hear them do that, because they're already doing the loops, where it's making 36 bars of what sounds like, if you close your ears a lot of times, it sounds like it's just like a computer, a desktop DJ making these sounds. They're making these group compositions and sounds and tones and shapes and colors. And it's so unbelievable at times. Here's the footage of them on the Elbe Philharmonic. Just a gorgeous building. And again, they're making it sound pretty much like modern dance music. I've just been kind of floored by it. I've spent a lot of time the last 3 or 4 days kind of watching them on YouTube. The bass saxophone to me is always very compelling, plus a baritone, plus a tenor, plus the bones, and one guy plays flute in a couple songs. It's really one of the coolest things I've heard in a long time. And there's even parts where the lead guy's kind of this trumpet player. And once in a while, the saxophone or the trumpet player will kind of be playing almost, I don't want to say improvised, but they're mimicking kind of lead parts from songs, and it's just an interesting hybrid. And I think it's kind of an interesting full circle in a way of things going back to acoustic sounds. And it's fun watching them in some of these concert footage, how they'll break stuff down dynamically. And then like any great techno DJ, it'll build and like bang, it'll just drop. And the place will just explode and everybody will just jump up and down. And it's like, it's really cool stuff. And I'm not really sure I can compare MEUTE to much else that I've heard, which is partly what makes them so cool. And you take some of the stuff they're doing. If you listen to the Trent Mahler remix and then listen to the original Trent Mahler song, it's interesting to hear how accurately they're getting a lot of these sounds reiterated through various horns and brass and woodwinds and the marimba. It's a pretty cool thing that I'm not really seeing a parallel to. And I think some of you all should check them out. I'm sure some of you, especially your European folks, are probably already aware of them. I'm surprised it's taken me this long to find them. They've been around since like 2015 or 2016. Had a few lineup changes, which is going to happen when you have 11 members. But man, it's exciting. It kind of gets my adrenaline going when I watch them, and I'm kind of compelled, stuck to going, okay, which horn's making that sound? And what group of horns is making that shape? And I just feel like it's very interesting because you can translate that into even the big band orchestras, and it gives you some insight into what those sounds are coming from at times. So it's just interesting to see the music broken down into this live visual revelation of what is creating these tones and templates. Pretty unrivaled, something that I've never really seen something quite like it before. There is a group out of New York called Al Michaels Affair that redid with an acoustic band and like basses and guitars the Wu-Tang, which was kind of similar. They were taking these sampled Wu-Tang songs and reproducing them live. But those songs are really basic. All the Wu-Tang stuff has a few basic parts. That electric piano, Hammond Rhodes, bass and a little guitar, and maybe a little horn. They're reproducing those Wu-Tang songs fairly easily, I think, compared to what these guys are doing. And again, it sounds like it's almost all completely organic, done on the place. I'm watching these guys create their own like delays. The trumpet's like using dynamic to create this kind of echoey delay effect on himself. The marimba guy's muting his hitting it and muting with his thumb, and then it's just really incredible to see these guys do what they're doing live. I think you all should check them out. Really, really fun. So in today's episode of Legacy Records, I'm picking one here that's a little difficult for me. One of my favorite records by him, which kind of helps make this a little easier for me. But I feel like their work as a quintet for that 2-year period is one of the greatest jazz groups of all time. And we're talking, of course, Clifford Brown and Max Roach Quintet. And this is still with Harold Land in the group before Rollins joins. And Rollins is kind of like at the tail end of things. Of course, Morrow, Richie Powell, Bud's brother, make up the bass and drums, George Morrow on the bass. And then Max and Clifford are two stars that kind of propel this group to another stratosphere of sound. And they push the boundaries and limitations of bebop, which actually had its own limitations, and reintroduce melody and groove and are kind of the foundation for a lot of what becomes hard bop in a lot of ways. The way they state themes like this before they go into their endless solos. And get out of Clifford's way. Get out of Clifford's way. Cherokee to me is one of the great proving grounds of your chops. And if I remember, it's from like a musical, Cherokee. Isn't it from Oklahoma or something like that? Which is quite, again, an example of music being reinterpreted. There's this song from an Oklahoma musical that we think is kind of fun, nice melody, memorable. Let's put some thunder behind that. And their version of Cherokee versus what the original, and this is pretty commonplace in jazz. A lot of these jazz remixes of songs would never reveal to you how saccharine or how minimal or how different the original pieces often are. It's pretty crazy. This is 36037 I think it makes them their third or fourth. I think it's the fourth record they're doing together. In the 36,000 sequence, in the first 50, 60 records, there's probably 6 or 7 Clifford Brown Max Roach pieces. And again, it's the cream of the crop from Emerson. They're doing other good things without question. But this Max Roach Clifford Brown thing, it's just off the map in terms of the landscape around it. And again, time's such a hard thing to grasp from our present viewpoint. We're talking 70 years ago nearly, okay? But if you listen to this stuff in 54 when it was being done, initially on 10 inches, most of it, I think. Not all of it was, but some of it was. If you listen to stuff in its time, and then you go to a Blue Note or a Prestige or any of the other labels, this is ahead of the curve. And it's impacting and influencing Miles and Coltrane's quintet group that's kind of forming and coming together. It's impacting and influencing our Blakey Horace Silver's conglomeration that's kind of forming as the Jazz Messengers as we speak. A lot of what we think of as the formative foundations of hard bop, Clifford Brown, Max Roach are the kind of precursor to that. And they swing so hard. The tempo is unlimited. It can just go at lightning speed. The great Richie Powell is one of the most underappreciated arrangers in jazz in this point. He is really brilliant in how he's composing and putting stuff together. And great things were kind of seen for Richie Powell. And sadly, he died in that car crash that took Clifford Brown's life. And what a loss Clifford Brown and Richie Powell were to jazz. I believe it's in mid-early 56 when that car crash happens. And as the telegraph goes around the jazz community, which was already kind of being splintered and torn apart by the mid-50s, but jazz still had a foothold. And as that message went through the jazz community from coast to coast, a lot of people couldn't play. A lot of people were very broken up because I think he was seen by his contemporaries as the great hope. You know, he wasn't just a talent. He was a personable, honest, good person that played like nobody else had ever played before. And you take the ebullience of Armstrong, the dynamics of Dizzy Gillespie, the fire and character of Roy Eldridge. Clifford Brown had all those things in that pastiche, and it was all just effortlessly regurgitated, but it all came out as Brownie. You know what I mean? He doesn't really echo Dizzy or Armstrong or Roy. They're there, but Brownie's his own institution. And Max Roach is, of course, one of the most finite, precise, laying down of rhythm players that we've ever heard. He can play at tempo and not miss a 16th note. You want a 32nd, I'll flurry that in for you. Max is a bad, bad boy. And you got guys like Harold Land, George Morrow, and Richie Powell. They're keeping up with these guys. And there's a lot of players out there in a lot of the jazz scenes that just wouldn't even be able to get on the stage with these guys. These guys were furious. They were just a flurry of activity. Yet they never abandoned melody. They never abandoned listenability. And you want to talk about free? There's little in this world more free than 16 bars of Clifford Brown. Come on now. You want to talk about freedom? Freedom is to effortlessly roller coaster your way through scales, notes, chords, changes, and not miss a shape, not miss a tone, not miss a step in the ladder. Brownie is just, which way you want to go? I haven't decided yet, but just put your seatbelt on because it's going to be a ride. And there's such a freedom in his expression. There's such a power and a self-realization in Clifford Brown. He's not necessarily trying to prove himself to the world. He's saying, world, I'm already ready for you. Are you ready for me? You know what I mean? But there's always this kind of humility as well with Clifford Brown. He wasn't this overbearing personality that kind of rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Miles Davis, for example, Jimmy Smith, for example, a guy with a huge ego. He knew he was the best, but he referred to himself as Mr. Jimmy because he was so impressed by himself. And he arguably had every reason to be. Jimmy Smith was a bad motherfucker. Let's not make any mistakes about that. But what Clifford Brown did, it changes the face of jazz in a very brief, short time. And when he shows up on the scene in the late 40s, early 50s, he's so quickly developing into this place where him and Max Roach can just tear the cover off the baseball. And it's just a fantastic experience. The hardest part for me was to pick one record, because in this Legacy series, we're always trying to pick the one LP that would kind of be the one you'd have to choose. And I find Brownie's stuff very difficult to rank. I don't feel like one record stands above the rest in terms of sales or appeal or people's knowledge of it. I guess if you had to really say Clifford Brown, just focus on Emerson, Clifford Brown, Max Roach Quintet, and that's the most important aspect of it, is focus on that group. And there's 5 or 6 records that will just all be equally important. So it was hard to pick one. Again, I chose this one because it was one of my first, and I've always been a huge fan of Cherokee. Parker, of course, brings that to the light, and everyone wanted to do Cherokee because the changes and the speed at which you could play it. I saw Lou Donaldson in his 80s, I believe, 10 years ago or so, in Minneapolis, South Dakota, playing probably more like 15 years ago. And he played Cherokee at an old age. And he still just stormed through the changes. Just a bad man, Lou Donaldson. But Clifford Brown was a whole nother level of virtuosity, but not for virtuosity's sake. And that's what makes Clifford Brown so special and so unique, is that his ego never intervenes. It never is, let me do a bunch of aerial display just to show you who I can. Everything is within context, within key, within melody, within the structure and the harmony and the melody of the song. You can hum along to everything Clifford Brown does, and if you play his stuff at slow speed, it's amazing to hear how precise he runs through all those changes and all those sounds. There's just nothing really you can compare Clifford Brown to. So I'm going to say Studying Brown is my Clifford Brown legacy record. But I hedge my bet to some degree because, like I said, there's a lot in the short window of 54, 55 that's really equal to this. And I'm going to, as a caveat, say the Clifford Brown with Strings record is one of the greatest crossings of the European sound with jazz. Parker does some wonderful with string stuff. Of course, Miles and his crossover Fusion Gil Evans records are kind of a descendant of that. The Third Stream is a descendant of that. Parker's influence on the universal shape of music, not just jazz, is omnipresent. And Brownie was stepping into those shoes and saying, you know what, these fit pretty good, I think. I can do this. And the confidence and the bravura and the personality and the sobriety of Clifford, it inspired a young generation of kids to say, I don't have to be a junkie to do Parker. I can do coffee and juice and be Clifford. And that's an important thing, because a lot of kids came up thinking, if I don't do heroin, I can't play. And that's certainly not the case. The heroin's not there to help you play. The heroin's to help you get there. Because life is tough. And especially if you're a black man in America in the 40s and 50s, there's a lot of sorrow, a lot of pain, struggle. Alcohol is a dangerous tool. Alcohol is a dangerous tool because you lose track of self when you imbibe too much. And so you can lose control of your faculties. Say things and do things you don't remember. And you can end your ass up in jail real quick being drunk as a black man in America. And so a lot of black guys kind of shied away from the bottle. Not all by any means. A lot drank. But heroin was this great alternative that was manageable in a lot of ways if you had access to drugs on a consistent basis. That was, the clean environment, the whole thing. I'm not advocating for heroin, but it was a safer option in a lot of senses than alcohol. But Clifford Brown was, I guess, again, this great optimistic hope for the future. And what a great loss he was. So we're going to go with that, studying Brown today for Clifford Brown. I spent a lot of time kind of mulling over which one to do, and that ends up being my winner. So check out MEUTE out of Hamburg, Germany. Let me know what you think of it. I think the one remix where the guy's singing the Trenton Mahler song, it's just fantastic. The song, I think it's called Dreams, beautiful melancholic stuff. And again, if you watch that rooftop concert, you'll get about 6 or 7 songs in kind of shorter, precise settings. You'll just be like, this has never been. And again, I would love to get them to do somehow Sing, Sing, Sing from the Benny Goodman. Fletcher Henderson, I think, wrote some of the charts for that. What an incredible piece that is, with the swelling and the beating and the grooving. I think it would be cool to hear, because again, electronic music has its roots in disco, and disco has its roots in swing music. I mean, danceable music is all interwoven. Jazz just happens to be this North American black man's interpretation and swinging enterprise. So MEUTE, if you ever get to hear this from the Jazz Shepherd, tackle Sing, 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 tackle Jumping at the Woodside, maybe take the A-Train. Let's hear a little jazz remix. See how you guys feel about that. Y'all be safe. Have a great day. Clifford Brown, almighty, really one of the greatest, and should be in everybody's collection. You may not have to have all Clifford Brown's Emerson work, but you should have at least some of it. It's a high watermark. It's a bar set that nobody really surpasses. They just kind of reach it. A lot of that great Blue Note hard bop reaches that level, but you don't really surpass Clifford Brown, and none of those guys would ever have claimed to. And if you'd ask anybody in 1955 in jazz, who's going to be the next king of this music, who's going to be the most popular jazz figure, and who's going to be remembered 50 years from now as the greatest jazz player, Clifford Brown was that ascending legend. And it was cut short. And so we ended up with other people being in that chair, somewhat undeservedly so, perhaps. So anyway, that wraps up this episode. If you enjoy the channel, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell for alerts. If you want to subscribe, it's always appreciated. If you want to support the channel, there's a merchandise store below. You can go in the description and see some hoodies and t-shirts, or else you can go to Patreon and pledge $5 a month to help out the channel. I'm down almost 15 pounds since the middle of January. Feeling good about that. Feeling great about that. So again, thank you to everybody. Y'all be safe. Thank you all my patrons. Love you guys. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day. Peace.